So we're going to move on to topic 2. James, what is your topic today, good sir?
Oh, I wanted to thinking about the Taekwondo, we were talking about it last night a little bit, is it kind of sparked my brain about like values and why do we have the values we have, and like where do we get them from? Why do we hold on to them? How do we evaluate them? How do we determine this is good, this is wrong? Because I love a deep conversation with somebody about why they believe what they believe. As I've gotten older, I've learned to maybe not try to change people's beliefs as much, but to kind of explore them with them, so that I can understand them. Because growing up, my worldview was very black and white, and and gray is really hard for people who are black and white people, because it's confusing, because there's a right and there's a wrong. And if you're a good person and who's black and white, you got to be on right. And if you're a good person or a bad person who's black and white person, then you do other things.
Mm-hmm.
And so something I had learned as I got older, like there's a lot of gray in the world, and it's very interesting to kind of look at that and try to interact with people in gray, instead of trying to like pull them out of the white. And I think a lot of times people get really scared of like, if I am a blank piece of white paper and I go interact with somebody who's gray, then I'm going to get a little bit of their gray on me, and I'm not going to be white anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's scary for some people. And But I don't really think it works that way. I think it really just helps you to appreciate, who they are, where they're coming from, and it lets you relate to them on a level that, especially if you're trying to help them, might actually help them down the road, instead of like trying to, oh, by the way, I know you feel like there's a lot of problems or you're a failure, but let me tell you about this other thing where you're also failing. It's like, wow, thank you so much
Right.
for letting me know that I'm more of a failure than I thought I was. It's like, yeah, yeah, you're welcome. Glad I could help. Let me know if you need anything. It's terrible. Why do we treat people like that? Um, so yeah, like, what do you think about like, and prep for this, I was thinking about like the first movie I remember, and the lessons I took away from that. But I'm going to ask you that first. Like, what is your first memory or experience of like values, and why?
Ah, boy. I don't know if I could pin it down to like a moment per se, but I would just say maybe like the first manifestations of like what's right, what's wrong, those values, that growth obviously, comes from my parents, that, your family. And like, okay, what do they value and how do they treat people and stuff like that? And that kind of obviously rubbed off on me. And I'd say that is where the first interaction or start of that growth would have begun, and like has carried since, like formulating my own sheet of paper as we're talking here with all the various colors. And like, yeah, I would say it'd have to start there. Like, once again, how do they treat people? What are their focuses on? Like, what determines success to them? What should I work for? What isn't important? What, should I not ignore, but maybe like push to the side and keep me on the straight and narrow, whatever. Keep me on the path of,
Yeah.
what I should be doing or focusing on. So, yeah, I would say that would be the start of it, is that moment.
Yeah. So I remember, um, and it's weird. A lot of things are weird for me. The 1930s King Kong.
Mm-hmm.
Did you ever see that movie? It's like the claymation giant, like toy gorilla yeah, I mean it's 1930s movie budget, so they're like, claymation and dinosaurs and all that.
Hmm.
But like I remember watching, like, the hero in that movie is a guy named Jack Driscoll.
Okay.
And he was like the coolest guy to me when I was like, I think I saw it when I was like 6 or 7. I was like, just like, he's so cool. And like, he went and he saved the girl, and like, helped, you know save the people, and kill the, King Kong, and which, is an unfortunate side effect in the movie. And that's something else I was thinking about. uh, but he was just like the coolest guy. And that, like, I was thinking about, that's the first movie I ever remember watching, was King Kong. And wanting to be someone like him, who, was dashing and strong, and like, had the cool, like, I mean, he had a little first mate's hat on, and a six shooter in his belt. And I was just like, dude, that guy is the man.
Hmm.
Like, gotta be like that guy. And that shaped a lot of, like, you know, watching movies later, reading books later, talking to people later. That kind of archetype is, I was drawn to people who were like that, and who uh, talked similarly, had similar traits to that. Um, but one thing I really liked, and I was thinking about today about that movie, um, and just an interesting side note is, um, a lot of times, especially like in literature, like I read a lot of history and stuff like that, you would see, um, revenge is a big motivating factor. But, the story of King Kong, if anybody doesn't know it, these people, it's like the 1930s, they're sailing around. They're going to shoot a motion picture on this deserted isle where this mythical monster giant gorilla lives. And they don't know that there's other people on this island. And they get there, and the other people find out about them, and they kidnap the heroine of the movie to make her a sacrifice. And there's never in the movie this part about how uh, there's no revenge for the people on the boat. They don't go in, like, I mean, where there, the technology difference between the people on the boat and the people on the island is massive. And like, they just go in and they focus on rescuing their people.
Hmm.
And instead of like, oh, you stole this person from us, we're going to get you back. Like, and I guess long term, in the end, they kind of help them by taking Kong off of their island. But also, there's a lesson about, just kind of, it's okay to like be fascinated by mythical things, but kind of leave them where they are. Don't go busting in and, like, sticking your fingers in stuff that you don't need to stick it in, because then you have to shoot 80-foot giant gorillas off of the Empire State Building with biplanes, and that's not good for anybody. Like, um, but yeah, like, that was my first heroic character that I ever was really introduced to. And I think, like, that really shaped who I wanted to be with my life, and shaped a lot of the things that I was interested in, a lot of the fearlessness, or that I wanted to, have the skills, knowledge, stuff like that, was kind of pushed my life in a direction, I think. And it's always like, I look back on it, and I can kind of see that throughout, and especially through movies, I think, because the first experience was with a movie that I like can really, like, put my finger on and say, this created a long term side effect in my life.
Right.
Um, yeah, so that's, I love movies. I love heroic characters in movies, and it's interesting how, like, looking back at it, I think that movie was a little bit ahead of its time, with the kind of like the whole, like, maybe we shouldn't have done this. Maybe we shouldn't have, like, we should have just kind of left it alone, and not jumped into something that we didn't need to be involved with. Which, I mean, that's what I took out of it. And Like that's not prevalent in a lot of like other movies from the era because, cinema is not usually too far ahead of its time because it's not relatable once it gets too far. Like, once the ideas get too abstract, it's only relatable to an ever reducing audience if it's the more abstract the ideas are from them. So yeah, if you haven't seen it, go see it. It's a 1930s movie, so there's still some, we've learned a lot about culture and what's good and what's wrong in society since then. But I think that movie is a pretty good movie overall, looking back at it. Um, so yeah, what do you think? Where do you think the values from Taekwondo, how have they have affected you from then to now? Where do you see them still like playing out in your life?
Oof. Well, they definitely are. You mentioned the six principles before. Like that's always something just I've tried to focus on and live by. And I mean, in a way, it's kind of silly to think about because like, oh, they're just words on the wall. Like you can take that and interpret it however you want, you know. But yeah, for some reason, those always stuck out to me. Like if I'm going to chase this goal of black belt, like I'm trying to obviously with the physical side of thing, but also, spiritually, mentally, I'm trying to focus on these aspects. Like that's the kind of person I want to be. I don't want to be the person that's going out there and just being like, "Oh, I'm a black belt. Let me, beat you up, etc." Whatever, assert dominance. Like I want to try and be a helpful person, and like with those words, and then also my own, side of the teaching journey. Like, how can I help you achieve what you're trying to achieve? And like, whether it was teaching Taekwondo or even now, like trying to do that as well. Like, what inspires you or what goals do you want to chase? Like, obviously, we all need to do a job, these mandatory things to make life happen. But then, like, you got to do stuff for yourself too. Like, where do you find enjoyment? And hearing people share those stories of like, oh, I enjoy doing X, I enjoy doing Y, like, that's great. How can I help with that? Or like, how can I support that in any way? And like that's something too that you mentioned, the gray areas. Like some people are very motivated to do those, or they're very down on themselves, like I can't do that, like that's silly that I even have that kind of aspiration to put the time into it. It's like, no, like I get it, I totally understand where you're coming from. A balance of time, a balance of funds, like are very important. But if you want to do something, you should and you can. It's just, a matter of balance, like everything. Hi, Artemis. Like, it's just something that you gotta figure out. And if, there's a way that I can help you reach that, then like to me, that's something important that I want to try and do. And I would definitely say Taekwondo has helped with that from the teaching aspect and stuff with that, because I received that from my own teachers and fellow students. It's like paying it forward. How can I help you? So yeah, it's definitely had a big influence.
I think that's what was the word I was going to use? I don't remember. I think that's one of the lessons that, because I took that away from it too, the kind of idea that some goals are farther away than others, but they still are achievable. And some goals are 10 steps and some goals are 1,000.
Right.
And some of those, 1,000-step goals, those are really long steps too. But it's still worth going after them, that a goal is still achievable. I moved down to where I live now and with the goal of getting the job that I have now. But I spent the first 2 years working at a grocery store and volunteering at my job, my current job, to put in face time, to sweat equity, we call it, to learn, to get training, and it paid off. but it took two, uh, 2 to 2.5 years between when I got here to when I actually, signed on the dotted line for employment with what I wanted to get. And that was a long time. And there was a lot of, there were a couple months that like, grocery stores, it's not a super high paying job, and there are a couple months where it was like, maybe I should have stayed where I was. I was doing pretty well up there. But, you know, my spirit wasn't satisfied there. And so like, I could have kept making a lot of money, but what's the cost with uh, the spiritual cost of you know pushing your spirit down or your heart down
Right.
to just pad your wallet, and what's that going to do to me long term, and how is that going to, because it does harm you to kind of kill that aspect of yourself in the name of something else. And sometimes it's worth it. Sometimes self-sacrifice, you know love, for instance, is a great reason to sacrifice. You know, helping people is a great reason to sacrifice a little sometimes. But other, like money, sometimes, very, very limited. So how do you think we we take those values? How do we make them mean something to someone else? How do we make them, because we have those values, and we'll just stick with the six principles of a black belt for continuity's sake. So it means something to me, and then I convey that to you through my actions, through what I try to convince you is important. How do we pass that on? How do you make someone else believe that this is important versus just repeating it as we're counting off push-ups?
Right. That's a tough one. And you said make, and I think that's the big, like, you can't do that. And that sounds
Yeah.
weird. Like, it's your goal, but honestly, with anything, you can't force it, because as soon as you start forcing an issue, it's like, no. And you mentioned
Yeah.
this even at
Yep.
the very beginning, like, oh, this is one side, this is the other side. How do they do that side? No, there's no like flexibility. So it's weird, because once again, that is your intention. Like, I want to help this person through this, but as soon as that like forcefulness, I don't know if this is the right phrasing, but as soon as that happens, you've kind of defeated the purpose. So I think the way to kind of share these values with people, it comes down to maybe only one or two things, but being open and honest with what you're saying and being genuine. Like, if it's something in class, for example, like, all I can do is share my experience and once again be honest with it, and then from there it's it's out in the wild, and if someone reaches out and takes it, good. If not, hey, I made the attempt, it wasn't reciprocated, that's fine. And it's just, the repeated attempts is fine, but once again, it's just like the good intentions. I can't be like trying to force it down anyone's throat. And that can go for anything. But yeah, just being open and honest with it. I think that's what people will pick up on, is that
Yeah.
genuineness. Because you can
This
tell from
person,
people just like how they're talking. You're like, okay.
this person actually believes it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I would say,
Yeah.
yeah, just that is just how you're putting those messages out there, and putting out the care and the love in your statement. And like I said, maybe it's not taken in from them, and that's fine. They're their own person. They need to grow at their pace too. Maybe later on they'll latch on to it. Maybe just take some time to gestate, or they're not in a position that either they want the help or they're ready for the help, or that message to come in.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a weird dynamic.
Yeah. This next question is going to be even weirder.
Oh boy.
So we just discussed, like, it has to be like altruism. You can't make somebody believe something.
Right.
You can only make them, like, make is the wrong word. You can only portray a sincerity that is strong enough that they want a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
They want what you have.
Mm-hmm.
And so how do we keep our portrayal, our living it, our genuineness? How do we keep the altruism in that? The you might call it the nobility or the purity of your intention to simply be for the benefit of someone else versus look how many people I have behind me.
Right.
Like, look, I've got 100,000 people on Twitter that follow me and retweet what I tweet. Like, there's some altruistic people like that out there, who have hundreds or millions of followers. But how do we ensure that we are being altruistic when we're passing on those values instead of just trying to pat our own ego again, or because we think we can fix them, or like, well, we're trying to take a little bit of the gray out of their little puddle and try to make it a little bit clearer, a little bit wider, or whatever. Like,
man, that is an interesting question, because like I know we're talking a lot about Taekwondo, or at least tying that in right now, but I can think of a specific example of someone who was doing it maybe differently, where they were trying to like get a following and stuff like that. And I love this person to death, but like that aspect, I was always like, is this really what you want to be doing? Like, you're teaching, and then you're like, oh, so and so, like, these are my posse, and then like you're just focused on like those people. And I was always like, I don't know, it's weird, because I've never thought about it this way, but I've never, and maybe this is big-headed of me, I've never really had that thought in my head of like, oh, I'm doing this for me kind of thing. Like, I've never had to give myself this mental check of like, what are my intentions, or like, I don't know. But I think I already mentioned mental check, but I think that's the big thing of like keeping things pure, or the right intentions, is like you got to kind of check in with yourself from time to time and keep yourself in control, because if you're not going to do it, no one is going to. Because then it turns into the whole thing, like we just said, of like making someone to do something that just is happening to you, and then you're not going to want to do it, and all that stuff. It's, wow, that is, why does that happen? And then like, how do you stay on that right path? I don't know. It's just like communicating with yourself, like making sure you're doing the right thing. But then I guess you could also flip it on its head. Like, some people could boost their own ego and be like, oh yeah, I am doing the right thing. Kind of, it's weird. Maybe having a good support group, like having people you trust to talk to and communicate, that's important too, to keep you on, be too true to yourself, I guess, and the right path. Man.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's you get your values from where whoever instilled them in you, and so they're kind of like the signpost, and you're someone else's signpost, and so you kind of eventually there's a little bit of a train where you see you're following along with someone, and there's enough of a connection that you've seen whether or not that's real in that person. And so you then kind of, I don't want to say hold each other accountable, but you develop a closeness, I think, with people who, you can kind of pull them aside and be like, hey man, this isn't it.
Right.
This, like, this is not the way.
Hmm.
It's like, this is the way. This is not the way.
Keep the damn helmet
Um,
on. No, I'm just kidding.
oh, such a great show. I love that show. I was just watching it before this too. Um, God, there's been so much great values-based content out lately. It's been awesome. Um, but like, I think that's it. Like, I think you hit the nail on the head of having a group of people who are committed or committed enough that they can be corrected, or influenced, or allow themselves to be not locked into my interpretation of these values. Because you mentioned earlier that the values mean a little, modesty means one thing to one person, something else to someone else. And so having them firm, those concepts firm, but also moldable enough that you can take off a chunk if you realize, well, that's not really modesty.
Right.
You know, because modesty to some people, if we'll just stick with the Taekwondo analogy and just beat that horse right into the ground. You may have somebody who, like, they can do a spin hook kick in a sparring match and just match ender right there every
Right.
time. And there's nothing really wrong with that they're that proficient with it. And to one person, them not bragging about, oh, I got the best spin hook kick. Come on, let's go spar. I'll spin hook kick you right into the ground. The match will be over in 30 seconds. Like, that's immodest, bragging. But to another person, modesty may just be like, I've got a really good spin hook kick and I am not going to trot it out at every single opportunity.
Right.
Because it's not helpful. It keeps me in one spot. It just puts me into a rut of this is all I can do. No one will want to spar with me, so I won't learn how to fight new people. Based on their styles, their size, their height, the length of their kicks and all that stuff. It puts them into a rut, and so just using their super technique is like at every opportunity. That's immodest because it's like a form of bragging,
Right.
And so the other person who does it, as often as they can, whenever they can, but they don't brag about it, might eventually get to a point where they're like, I need to stop using this so much. That's modesty, and just kind of shave a little bit off of that block in their brain of this is what modesty means, until it and it's going to change shape a little bit.
For sure.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the big important thing is being flexible, like not like giving up your values, but like adapting to the changes that are going to happen. Because you can't, there's no way you're going to be the same person, for example, when you're 10 and your values when you're 10 to 30. Oh man, I really want this action figure. Maybe, but you know what I mean. Like, it's going to grow over time. So I think having that flexibility is good.
A very wise man once told me, and this was years ago, but I was talking to him, and I wished him a happy Father's Day because he was my dad's still alive. He's in my life. He's a great, great, great dad. I cannot say enough. As I've become an adult, and as I've become, an adult who's aware of, mental health issues with myself, because we all have issues, here or there. There's very few of us who are like perfectly well adjusted. And as I've become a husband, I have realized just how amazing a father my dad was. So I can't say enough of it, but part of my childhood experience growing up, or my teenage years and early adult years, was the extreme benefit of having other men come alongside me and teach me, train me, coach me, um, mentor me in different ways. And some of the stuff my dad couldn't provide. Uh, and so, I wished this man a happy Father's Day one year, and he said, as I've gotten older, I've become sure of fewer and fewer things. But those things which I have become sure of, or which I remain sure of, I am more sure than I have ever been. And that's kind of stuck with me of like the things that really, really matter are not many. You know, people being, basically it. You know, um, how you treat animals, that's important. How you do your job, that's important. But you could kind of lump them into the larger, I guess I wouldn't say people, I would say relationships is the thing. How I treat my dog when I just sat down and she wants to go out. That's a character thing, And so relationships to me are like the most important thing. Um, Everything past that is kind of either a sub aspect of that or non-important.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so how we treat people, how we engage with them, when they disagree with us, um, how we engage with them when they don't want to engage with us, or when they don't like us or even hate. Uh, that is my worldview of values is shrinking around how do you treat people?
Mm-hmm.
How do you treat relationships? How do you treat things that you get, like, how does, like, I get a lot of benefit out of my dog. She's a great dog. She's just awesome. So fun and whatever. But she can't really offer me anything of her own accord.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the pound and I got that dog and I brought her home. None of this was her choice, really.
Right.
And so that's all on me. And how I treat her in the middle of that is important. And so I think that's like the big thing is how we treat those around us, how we treat relationships, how we have discourse with people is just it. It is the thing, that little thing that as I'm older, I'm in my mid 30s. Like,
older.
It's been a while since it's been a while since, and yeah, exactly. Someone else would laugh at that and say, this guy's still a baby, and I am in a lot of ways. But someone who's 14 does not see me that way. I used to think so much stuff mattered, and it's really just kind of boiling down to just be good to people. Just really, care about them. Don't, drive like a jerk. Don't yell at, people at restaurants. Like, don't yell at people at the voting booth or, the doctor's office or wherever. Just, really just, do anything in your power that could make somebody's day a little bit better. And that's modesty, courtesy, integrity, perseverance, self-control, and indomitable spirit, all wrapped into one tight bundle of, how we treat people.
For sure. 100%. James, that was an awesome topic. Thank you very much for that. Appreciate it.
I was really looking forward to it when I thought of that. I was like, oh, this is gonna be good. I can't wait for this.
It's really good.
Or at least I hoped.
Yes, yeah. Really good. And those conversations are definitely important to have.